that, in fact, many of those missiles have actually hit these bases, and that the number who have been injured and wounded in this conflict is much higher than what the Pentagon is reporting to us. Right now, they're saying that that number of wounded is 427. And the reason all of this is important, as we all know, is that we're supposed to be in a ceasefire right now. The Memorandum of Understanding was signed a month ago, which was supposed to bring us to the 60-day ceasefire as both sides were trying to hammer out an agreement on Iran's nuclear program. But instead, what we're seeing is American lives lost. And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has said that all of this, their sacrifices, has only stiffened our resolve, Alicia.
Right. And Tom, in addition to everything that Priya just laid out there, the question that looms, why? Why are we there? What is this all for? In your piece in The Atlantic, you argue that Trump owes Americans a better explanation for why their sons, why their daughters are dying overseas, because so far we've heard all kinds of rationales from the president. I want you to take a listen to this. It begins with February 28th and it ends with this weekend.
Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis. If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. It's a whole different group of people. So I would consider that regime change, and frankly, they've been very reasonable. So I think we've had regime change. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change. The main parts of the deal is they can't have a nuclear weapon. The strait will open immediately. What we're doing now is we're ending any chance where they can have a nuclear missile. If you look at it, after a week and a half, not 4 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks, we stopped them from probably, but I don't want to have the word probably.
Listen, Tom, I try to be judicious about how much sound I play of the president, but I think it is important to watch the evolution in messaging there. The families of the 17 U.S. service members who have been killed so far in this war. What is owed to them and to every American who wants to know why this happened and why we are there?
Certainly something more than a bushel of Mad Libs that the president seems to reach into whenever he has to answer a question about why he's putting American lives on the line. He has now settled on, at least for this week, that American service people are dying to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. He's leaning on that one. That whole business about, if we didn't strike in 2 weeks, there would be mushroom clouds is just a crock of nonsense. And he really is trying to shut off questions. He's trying to shut off debate because nuclear weapons are supposed to be the thing where everybody just nods and says, well, if it's a nuclear weapon, what more could we do? I mean, we can't question the president about that. But as you've just shown, he has dialed through various rationales. And here's the bottom line about why he's doing that. Because on the first night of this war, he expected this regime to fall within days. That was his only plan. That was his only objective. He didn't have any backup plan for what would happen if we weren't greeted as liberators and there were rose petals in the streets and statues of Donald Trump being built in Tehran. He was egged on by Netanyahu, by Hegseth. There were people in his circle who tried to warn him this was not going to happen, and he didn't listen. So now he's stuck. And now he's trying to undo all of the problems that he himself created by going into this war of choice, like trying to reopen the strait, trying to, protect American service people in the Gulf, trying to protect our friends and allies in the Gulf. But these are all problems of his own creation and that didn't exist before the night he started this ill-advised war.
Secretary Kendall, Americans are waking up today to headlines that say that there is the possibility of an expanded war, of a broader war. Can you give us a sense of what that could look like?
What seems to be going on, Alicia, is that the president's trying to escalate to put coercive pressure on Iran, and there's no sign at all that that's working. What Iran is doing is broadening the war by causing attacks into Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. The straits that Saudi Arabia depends upon to move oil outside the Straits of Hormuz to the west are under threat from the Houthis now. So this is going in exactly the wrong direction from where it should be going. You can't overstate the scale of the strategic blunder by President Trump that this was. On his own, without consulting the American people, without going to the Congress, he initiated this conflict on the frankly very naive idea that there'd be an immediate regime change, and some of the images that Tom talked about would come true. I don't know where he ever got that idea, but here we are. And I don't see a clear way out of this. It's putting a lot of stress on our military. There are additional deployments now, both fighters and tankers moving into the region, which suggests additional escalation. He's pretty much out of options other than to try to put more pressure on Iran through a military force. And that's what I think appears to be happening.
Priya, I want to go back to that New York Times reporting that I believe you referenced earlier. This is just a bit of it. In the week leading up to the Iranian attack on Friday that killed 2 U.S. soldiers, Iran carried out 3 other strikes against U.S. forces in the country. Those attacks injured dozens of U.S. service members and damaged several helicopters. That's according to several U.S. officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity. But the Pentagon did not disclose the earlier strikes nor the casualties and damage they inflicted. Priya, as I said earlier, the Pentagon has not offered a briefing on this war since May 5th. How difficult does that make it for folks like you to do your job and let the American people know what is actually happening when it comes to this war?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you know, the Pentagon created this new press policy, which forced any reporter who wanted to be credentialed to go inside of that building to essentially have the reporting looked at by a Pentagon official. So, of course, any legitimate news source, including ours, refused to sign that. So not only do we not have access to the building to be able to walk around and ask questions about the military strikes that are going on, ask questions about the number of service members who are missing or wounded in action, but they're also not holding any sort of briefings to allow us to be able to ask questions. And in addition to that, there has been a very limited number of opportunities, essentially one, for any reporter to embed in the region to see for themselves what's going on. So really, we're having to take the administration and the Pentagon at their word for what's occurring over there. And as the New York Times pointed out, and as we've seen, the number of wounded just about a week ago was 414 on the official website that the Department of Defense puts out to let us see those wounded numbers. It went up to 427. That's only a 13-person, count going up. It just doesn't make any sense. And so I think a lot of us have questions about really what's occurring. And I think the American taxpayers and the general American public has a right to know what's occurring overseas, especially given the fact that the death toll is rising.
The most transparent administration in history, self-proclaimed. Priya Sridhar, I am told that we have to let you go do what you do best and report. Thank you so much for being with us. Tom, I'm not sure if you saw this, but Trump's preferred network, Fox News, even they are expressing confusion about how this war is dragging on. I want you to take a listen to Maria Bartiromo.
I don't understand how it's possible that Iran has the capabilities to fight this way and continue to try to lash out at Gulf countries and U.S. military bases, because the U.S. has obliterated Iran's military, and the president continues to reiterate that.
Tom, you can feel the frustration swelling because the dots don't connect.
She's so close to getting it. That, maybe the president hasn't told her the truth, and that maybe we shouldn't have used words like obliterated in the first weeks of the war. The president has this kind of childlike pattern where he tries to, we've talked about this many times on this program and others. He tries to wish things into being. He says their missile capability has been obliterated, meaning I want that to be true. But that's not how the real world works. And in fact, some of those missiles that he claimed were obliterated, he then said hadn't been obliterated, but that Iran needed to have some because it's only fair because other people have them. Well, now those missiles are killing American service people. And so the president is now backpedaling again. And the problem for for the faithful at Fox and for the people watching is he doesn't expect you to really believe anything he's saying. He just expects your support and your loyalty. And he says whatever he has to say to get through the next few minutes. But of course, He's making fools out of everybody that has tried to defend him because it's obvious that he has not been telling the truth for weeks, even if he knows the truth, because that's the other, just one other thing to be concerned about here. Are they telling him the truth, or are they just showing him, B-reels of things blowing up? I mean, how much does the commander-in-chief really understand about what's going on in one of the biggest wars America has launched since Vietnam, certainly since Iraq? And I don't think there's a clear answer to that. He does not come across as apparently understanding anything that's going on. And that's, I think the parents and the friends and the families of American service people deserve something better than just a bunch of bumper stickers and hand waves.